Hi everyone, it's Grace Coolmer from the Mulberry Journal here, and we're doing a very special interview today with Vivienne Fox from the Home Education Association in Australia. So this episode is just for Australians. We're covering exactly what you need to know if you want to register for homeschooling in Australia. So sorry for our international friends, this one probably won't be up your alley. However, if you would like us to cover the registration requirements if you're in the US, in Canada, in the UK perhaps, or in New Zealand, please let us know. There might be someone that we can get in contact, or maybe you yourself have a contact and you could put us in touch with them. So email us at hello@themulberryjournal.com, hello@themulberryjournal.com, and let us know if we can do a similar interview for you in your country. That would be great. So with the interview today, as I said, we have the president of the HEA chatting with us today, and I've actually roped in my wonderful husband, Eric Coolmer. He also helps me do a whole bunch of stuff at the journal, and he has basically sat down with Vivienne and asked her a bunch of questions that an absolute novice would ask, because Eric wasn't homeschooled and has never homeschooled before. Our son is just 2.5. We are nowhere near registering yet, and so he has just completely gone out there and asked all of the silliest questions you could say. So if you're listening to this today and you're feeling like, I have no idea where to start with registration and it's a huge scary beast, then this interview will be perfect for you. And if you're already homeschooling but you're still feeling a little bit unsure, it's a great recap for your state as well. So Vivienne covers in detail New South Wales, and she also does a broader overview of the requirements in every other state in Australia. She also gives a bunch of really handy tips on moderator visits and what to expect, some secret keys to success that are really simple but will help you do much better when you're talking through with the officials in your state. So it's well worth a listen. I hope that you find this information valuable, and I'll hand it over to Eric. But before I do, I just want to also mention that planning and reporting at the Mulberry Journal is something that we're sort of having a focus on this year and beyond, because we understand that it is something that people do want to learn more about. So we also have created a planner, which is a 2018 planner that you can download and print off yourself. You can purchase it on our website for a limited amount of time. It won't be available all year. We will close sales probably sometime in March. So keep an eye out for that, and if you're on the fence and wondering whether to do it, go and have a proper look now. And it basically has 150 pages with templates to suit all kinds of homeschooling styles and family setups. And it's basically designed to help you with this stuff, because it is tricky to know how much detail to give and where to store that information for your moderator visits. So go and have a look at that. You can find that on themulberryjournal.com/planners, and I'll pop a link below this, as well as all the other links that Viv mentions below this video, so check those out. Okay, I'll hand it over to Eric now. Enjoy.
Hi Vivienne, how are you?
Oh, good, thanks. How are you?
It's good, yes, good, thank you. Thanks for joining me today to chat through some of this information about recording of home learning. It's great to have you with us. Let's get stuck in. So, from my perspective, I mean, I'm someone who's not actively homeschooling as a parent myself. We're a few years off anything official just yet, but it probably puts me in a good position to ask some genuine questions here and things that for which I don't really have an answer at the moment, which is great. I'm hoping they'd be the same sort of questions that some of our audience would have. Those parents out there who are just starting to think about it, or are just starting off in their first year. They've kind of taken the plunge, and it's all still a big scary world out there. Let's try and make it a bit more normal for them, and give them a bit more information about what happens with the whole recording home learning thing. To me, it kind of sounds like a big beast. Like, what do I record? So what's it like to have a home visit? What exactly are they looking for, these people, when they're coming to check on what you're learning? And how does the process work?
I think the first thing to say is that home education and registration are quite different things. So when people think about starting home education, well, really you've already started, because that's what you do from when your baby's born. And as your child grows, you're just helping them to achieve the next thing that's on their agenda, from walking and talking to then, dressing themselves, feeding themselves in an appropriate way, and then, reading and doing maths and so on. And really all of life is learning, and the registration process is actually quite a different thing. So when we talk about registration for homeschooling, every single state in Australia has different requirements, and there's almost no correlation. Each state thinks of its own residents differently. So they're not interested in people outside the state, only in the people who are inside their state. And once you move out of the state, say travelling or going to a different state, it's like you've gone to another country or another planet. They don't really talk to each other.
Yeah, right. Okay. So new state, new regulations and rules.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you can't, so some people will move from Victoria to New South Wales and they'll say, well, can I just continue on my registration or transfer my registration?
Right.
But it's as if you weren't registered. When you turn up to New South Wales, it's as if you weren't registered anywhere else, and they just start from the beginning.
Right. Okay. And what about for those? What about for those families who travel full time? I mean, like we're currently in Queensland. We're residents of New South Wales, but we're currently in Queensland traveling around. If you're on the road, how does that work?
Some states view travellers in a generous way.
Sure.
In Queensland, they have quite a generous attitude towards travellers. In New South Wales, even if you're travelling within New South Wales, they won't register you if you identify as somebody who's travelling. So if you register and then while you're there you say, oh, we're just about to go on a trip for 2 terms or something like that, they'll say, oh, we can't register you.
Right.
Whereas in Queensland they will.
So is that because you need a home base, and so then they're basically saying, well, if we need to check up on you, we're not going to fly to South Australia or Queensland to come and check on how it's all going? Is that the idea?
Well, it's because of their very limited definition. Right. So in New South Wales, the definition of home education is delivered by the parent in the home. So even if your home is a caravan.
Yeah, that was my next question.
If your home is a caravan and it's on a block of land that you say that it's going to stay on that block of land for some amount of time, then it will be okay. Or in a caravan park, as long as you're not saying that you're going to move the caravan. If you don't say that you're going to move the caravan and then in 6 months' time you contact them and say, we've moved, can you come out and do another visit? They'll do that. They'll transfer your address. Okay. They'll come and look at your caravan again and then in a different address, and then they'll register you at that new address. But if you say we don't know, if you tell them that you're going travelling and that you intend to travel for more than 12 weeks or something, then they won't register you.
Right, okay.
This is something that the HEA is actually attempting to have addressed because it's actually very limiting. And
yeah, I could imagine that would affect a lot of families who are on the road.
Yeah. So sure. They'll say that distance education is appropriate for those families, which it actually often isn't.
Right. Okay. Distance education being through a school or a TAFE or something like that.
Yeah, through a school of distance education. So, but they'll say that they can't register for home education, which actually doesn't make any sense. But in Queensland, it works. It's okay. In Victoria, in South Australia has kind of different rules, but you can still do travelling. It's just
Yeah, great. Cool. And we'll get to that in a minute about sort of each state's requirements. And obviously people have to do their own research in their own state. And so we'll attach notes both under this recording, and we'll go through it, sort of the bare basics, in a minute, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But just on that initial, so you said there was a difference between registering and the recording bit. Can we just touch on the recording?
So there's a difference between the actual process of home educating your child,
sure,
and the requirements for registration. Registration often includes a component of recording what your child's done, and that's another thing again, kind of.
Sorry, yeah, I think I was jumping the gun then. That was the piece that I was sort of getting towards was, okay, so you've registered, let's play the scenario, you've registered, and you have those requirements of what you need to do in order to be officially home educating. So when it comes to that recording and the requirements of that, and someone checking up on that in your state, what are they really looking for? Like what? Because obviously, if you go to a school, there's a curriculum, and there's a real recording of everything that's happened by the teacher. So how does that kind of work? Because it feels like a big beast. The parents need to be a teacher, essentially, and have all this massive workbook. I remember my teacher having those, like, the big arch lever folder with like everything we've learned for the year, kind of thing. How detailed do parents need to be?
Well, it differs from state to state.
Of course it does. Yeah.
And yes, I have to say, I know a lot about New South Wales, sure, and a limited amount about the other states, because although I've done a fair bit of research for the Home Education Association, I haven't actually personally registered in any other state other than New South Wales.
Sure.
And so I know the process in here quite well, and I can give an idea about the other states. But also the Home Education Association can provide more detailed information about other states and link you up with people in those areas. So.
Awesome. Okay, and we'll link to that under the recording for this as well, and that would be great. Okay, so let's talk what we know of then. So let's talk New South Wales.
In New South Wales, the requirement is to have, in order to get registered, you need a plan linked to the New South Wales syllabus, and you need to show that you've got resources and that you've got a method of recording and assessing, and those sorts of things. They also want to come and see your home and cite your child. So okay. When you register in New South Wales, you need to do those things at a home visit. So you apply, you send off your application form, and then a few weeks later, an authorised person will, or within a week to a couple of weeks, ring you up and say, can I organise a visit? And then they'll come out at a time that suits you and have a visit. Yeah. At the visit, the Home Education Association actually recommends having an experienced home educator there with you to provide support.
Okay, great. And so could someone get a friend who has been been doing it for a few years?
Yeah, so okay, a friend is helpful. If not, I mean, someone else supportive is quite helpful, even having your partner or your mother, if they're supportive, or something like that. Just having somebody else there actually makes you more confident. And although the requirements set out these particular things, what is actually really key is just being confident and saying, I think I can do this standing on my head, even if you're not feeling very confident and you need to.
Yeah, cool. So just to help you with not being too sort of frazzled and flustered when they come, because it can be a daunting process. Yeah. That makes sense. Okay,
and
great.
They provide no resources or support at all. They want to see you've got everything. If, for example, you didn't provide a plan for one of the key learning areas, they won't say, oh, you need to also make sure you cover geography. They'll say, sorry, we can't register you.
Right. Okay. So you really have to cover your bases there.
Yeah, you have to have all the things, which is why the Home Education Association's put together a registration pack, and we have
cool
information in that.
Yeah,
so you provide all these things, and you say, yes, I can do it. And initially, they'll give you registration for a year. And then when they come back after the year, you also need to show, and this is where the recording comes in, that you have provided the education or an education for your child, and you need to have some records of that. So there is a requirement to do record keeping, but there is no actual outline of what that record keeping should look like.
Okay.
So some people will keep a diary, and they'll detail in that diary what they've been doing week by week or something like that. But that's actually quite onerous for parents to spend a lot of time writing down what they've been doing.
Sure.
Some people will take photographs. Some people will actually have like a closed Facebook page where they upload the photographs and say, we've done, this photograph of cooking shows maths and science and food technology, and so they'll do it that way.
Okay.
Some people will just stick a whole lot of completed work, whatever that looks like, into a cardboard box and label it completed work.
Cool.
So there's a whole range of ways of recording. And some people won't show any samples of work, but they'll get the outcomes codes, a list of outcomes from the syllabus, and just tick off.
Oh, okay.
So it's quite a range. There is no requirement as to what the record keeping looks like, just that you have some. Great. And it's really for you. Cool. The other thing for New South Wales that's an important thing is that you don't actually need to show that your children have progressed. There's no requirement to show that your children have actually learnt anything, just that you have provided learning opportunities for your children.
Sure, okay. Right, and so there's no testing criteria per se to show from A to B.
No, and no requirement to show any progress, or even that the plan that you're delivering is age appropriate. So for example, particularly when you have children with special needs, their learning might be quite disparate. They might be working at quite early stage outcomes in one area, and they might be working at advanced outcomes in another area.
Yeah, of course.
And that's all perfectly fine.
Okay, sure. Oh, that's good to know. That's great.
Yeah, adjusting to meet your child's needs is actually enshrined in the policy document too. So they actually recognise that you should be doing that.
Fantastic. Cool. Okay, that's great. And for people who are wanting to record some of those day notes and those sorts of things, we have a free printable one. You can go and grab it. I'll put the link to that under as well. And we have our Mulberry Planner, which we've been talking about over the last sort of month or so for people here in Australia, and we'll link to that as well. So that's cool. Now, let's attempt to do a bit of an around the grounds, maybe just in how it varies from what you understand, from what you know, obviously, which is New South Wales. So let's go Queensland. How does that vary in terms of just the actual process for parents?
Yeah, so in Queensland, as soon as you send in your application form, you actually get provisional registration. So this is quite helpful for someone who's taking their child out of school. Some parents have suddenly realised that their child that school is not appropriate for their child, and they need to take them out straight away. So as soon as you send in that application form in Queensland, you actually can get provisional registration, even if you don't send a plan in with that application form.
Cool.
So that's quite a helpful thing in Queensland.
Yep.
So that gives you 2 months, and then within those 2 months, you can provide them with the extra things that they want, which includes a plan. So once you've sent in your application form, you can include a plan either with that application form or at some time within the next 2 months.
Sure.
And that
is that by way of a visit as well?
no visit required in Queensland.
Right. Okay.
You just send in your plan, and it doesn't need to link to a particular curriculum. So the New South Wales plan has to link to the New South Wales syllabus, although the linking in New South Wales is not very. It just means you just really need to show that you've looked at it. You don't need
fairly loose
detailed linking. Whereas in Queensland, you don't need to show that you've linked to a particular curriculum, but you have to show that you're planning a high quality education for your child.
Right.
And
okay.
that's a little bit more probably subjective. And then the people in the office need to agree that you have planned a high quality education.
Cool.
And then, so you'll get registration. When you get full registration, it goes for the year. But at the 10-month mark, so 10 months after you've got that full registration in Queensland, you need to send a report in on like a physical report, not a digital copy.
Okay.
And that report needs to include samples of the child's work in 3 key learning areas.
Right.
And the samples need to come from a couple of months apart. So, say, June and September, and they need to then demonstrate how the child's progressed in that key learning area between the 2 work samples.
Yeah, cool. So you can't just stuff it at the end of the year with sort of here's one in November and here's one in December. It has to be evidence of
a few months apart. So
okay, sure.
Show that your child's progressed. I think this can be quite challenging for parents because children don't necessarily progress in a linear fashion, and particularly not in 3 key learning areas. So I think that can be quite challenging. So in New South Wales, the home visit is quite challenging, just to have a person coming into your house and assessing you.
Yep.
I think in Queensland, the challenge is to be able to demonstrate progress in those 3 key learning areas. But then, a lot of people do it, and so talking to somebody who's in your local area who's showing progress using sample documents is really worthwhile.
Yeah, great. Cool. Okay. That sounds helpful. And I suppose for people who are perhaps feeling a bit isolated, they may not have close friends who do it. There's always Facebook groups. There are other ways of sort of linking up with people and
and the Home Education Association website.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Local contacts. And if you can't find someone in your area, you can email us and we can help you link you up with someone.
Same here. You can email us. I'm sure we'll be able to find someone. So,
it's
so
really
either or, guys. Yeah.
That linking. I think that's your best resource is being linked with your local community of home educators.
Yeah, for sure. That's great. Okay, cool. Let's go south. Let's go to Victoria.
Okay, in Victoria, the requirements have just changed. Previously, you just sent in an application form in which you promised to provide a good education for your child, but now the requirements have just changed this year. So now you do need to send in a plan.
Okay.
But you don't need to link to a particular curriculum.
Right. So similar to Queensland in that regard.
Yeah, and you don't need to. You do need to. I think record some of what you do, but not everyone gets reassessed every year. Only 10% of the people get reviewed in any year, and you'll get a bit of a warning that you're on the list to be reviewed that year.
Right. Okay. And is that by home visit or is that by just reviewing all your information that you've sent in. And your
Yeah,
reports.
it's a review by documentation, and I'm not
Okay.
sure that anyone's actually been reviewed yet,
Right.
because
Okay.
we started this year.
Of course.
But there are one of the things that I have to say the Home Education Network in Victoria has managed to do
Yep.
is that they've had quite a lot of input into the process, and so they've even managed to get home educators involved in the process of assessing plans and assessing documentation. So hopefully that will all be an appropriate regulatory system for people in Victoria because of the work that Hannah has done down there.
Fantastic. Okay, and we'll link to the HEN as well. Home Education Network, that is.
Yeah.
Just the acronym.
It's a very, very worthwhile part of home education, though.
Yeah.
Great.
Absolutely. All right, let's go to Tasmania, further south. Is there any specific requirements down there?
So Tasmania has also recently changed its regulatory system.
Okay.
And because of the work of home educators, particularly the Tasmanian chapter of the Home Education Association, those requirements are continuing on with the previously really good system that Tasmania had. So Tasmania has had a really good system for quite a long time. You don't need to link to a curriculum, and you do have a home visit, but the key thing in Tasmania is that the home visit, the person who comes to your house to do the home visit has home educated themselves.
Right. Okay.
That's a requirement of those people who come out and do the visits, which in New South Wales, the person who comes out and does your visit has never home educated themselves at all.
Right. Okay.
So when you
it makes a big difference.
It makes an enormous difference. So you've got people who are coming out visiting who actually recognise what home education looks like. You do need to show that you've got a high quality education, and you get assessed every year now. So in Tasmania, but because of the system, which includes home educators as part of the process, it should still be a good system. We do. HEA TAS has produced quite a comprehensive document providing a lot of answers to these questions, which I'll give you the link to.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll add that in too. So within New South Wales, we have the ACT as well. How does that vary from New South Wales?
It varies quite a lot as well.
All right.
So the ACT, it has no requirement to follow a particular curriculum, and you don't have to have a home visit.
Sure.
But you do need to go into the office and do a meeting with them.
Right.
One of the things that occurs currently in the ACT is that you put in your application form and you get a 6 months provisional registration, which means that you don't have to provide a plan straight up. You send in that application form and you get 6 months provisional registration. And this is another thing which is quite helpful.
That sounds really helpful.
For when families are just, they're just quickly pulling their child out of school. The child might have had a bad experience and be quite stressed and anxious, and so you can give them a bit of breathing space before you have to try and work out what home education is going to look like for your family, which is quite a different thing from family to family. Education always looks different in every family. So that's quite important and valuable. And then you go in and you have a visit, and you have to show that you are going to provide a high quality of education. And then at the end of the year, you show that you've provided a high quality education.
Sure. Okay.
So I think it would be important to link up with people in the ACT to show how you're going to do that. And the Home Education Association has also got a chapter in the ACT.
Great. Okay, cool. So using that resource and finding another home educator within the ACT if you're over there would be a helpful resource to have a look at. I don't know. In my own opinion, it sounds kind of daunting to go meet in the office. You're kind of meeting on their terms, but I'm sure it's more relaxed than.
Yeah, well, I think too, you have to take all your stuff in. So, if you want to show them resources, you have to remember to take those things in.
Of course.
Whereas if you're at home, you've got all your resources there, but then you also feel this pressure to make sure your house looks really
that's it.
great.
Look at this utopia of learning that I've provided. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
All right, let's jump to South Australia. What's different down in SA?
So South Australia, it's the only state that doesn't have home education enshrined in its education legislation.
Right.
So what you're actually doing when you're in South Australia is you enroll in school and then you get an exemption from attendance.
Ah, okay. So that's a different way.
Yeah, it's quite a different way.
Sure.
One of the things that is challenging for people in South Australia is that both biological parents actually have to sign the application form for exemption from attendance.
Okay, that's a significant one.
Is a significant one, and the HCA is currently lobbying against that because that can be quite challenging, and it can actually cause a lot of grief in families.
Of course, yeah, of course. And in the case that one of the biological parents has passed away, how does that?
Then you can show a death certificate. So that's
okay, sure.
But if the other parent is estranged and abusive, then that can be a big problem for families.
Of course, yeah, I could see how that would be an issue.
Currently in South Australia, you can get an exemption from school attendance for the purpose of travelling for 12 months.
Okay.
And that's a bit of a workaround because you don't need 2 signatures for that.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. So that's an option for those guys who may struggle with that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Okay,
so
great.
If you're getting an exemption for home education, you do need to have a visit with someone from the Department of Education and show certain things, the plan and so on. It would be worthwhile contacting the South Australian chapter of the Home Education Association and Beverly Payne, and that is probably the best thing that you can do if you are in South Australia.
Okay, great. So you mentioned Beverly Payne there.
She's part of our South Australian chapter.
Great.
And she's beloved of home educators in Australia.
Yeah, if you don't know who Beverly is, you should go and check it out. She runs the website The Educating Parent, I think it's called, from memory, which is also a wealth of information there as well. Great. What have we got left? We have WA and Northern Territory. You can take a pick.
Yeah, so in the Northern Territory, we also have a chapter of the Home Education Association, and this is largely because they recently changed their rules in Northern Territory. So previously you didn't have to link to the curriculum. Now you do need to link your plan to the Australian curriculum or another approved curriculum. So
and they would have information on which ones are approved, which ones are not. Okay.
The challenging thing in the Northern Territory has been that the local principal has come out and done the assessment for home education, which means that you might be removing your child from that school, and then the person who's the principal of that school might come out and be doing your assessment for home education.
Right. Okay. So there's a small conflict of interest there potentially. Yeah. Okay. I see how that works.
The HEA Northern Territory chapter has really been working at changing these requirements so that it's not the local principal, and they've had a lot of success in working with the education department. So hopefully you won't come across that quite so much.
I mean, it would be to the advantage of the principal to not have to add that on their plate as well if they're already running a school of a couple of hundred kids or whatever that is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's better for home educators to have somebody who actually has more of an idea about home education coming to do the visit. So you do need your plan, and you do need to have your visit, and it's a bit of a process. It's a couple of steps in the process, and so it's definitely worthwhile getting in touch with people from the Northern Territory, and we can provide links to our chapter.
Great. Yeah, we'll add those as well. That would be awesome.
Mm.
Okay, cool. So the WA contingent.
Yeah. So
how does that work?
WA, the requirement is that you register with your local regional office. So in
Right,
every other
okay.
state, there's like a central office. In New South Wales, it's NESA. In Queensland, it's the HEU. In Victoria, it's VRQA. Whereas in Western Australia, you do need to register with your local regional office, and each of those offices has slightly different requirements.
Right.
So,
Okay. I gather the first step then is working out which region you're in.
yeah.
Yep. And then figuring out the requirements for that region.
So you do need to have a plan linked to the Western Australian curriculum, which is actually not dissimilar from the New South Wales curriculum.
Okay.
As I understand it,
Sure.
they do visits. I don't think they have to be in your home. I think they can be in your home or at a mutually agreeable place.
Okay.
And I think it would depend quite a lot on your particular regional office and your moderator as to how positive that experience was. So
cool. The moderator being the person who visits, is that correct?
Yeah, the person who visits.
Just so that terminology.
Certainly the person who visits in each state is called something else. Or,
sure.
You might not get a visit if whatever state you're in. If you get a visit, the person who visits is called something else, and in Western Australia they're called the moderator. So,
right.
I would particularly recommend Home Education WA, which is an organisation similar to the Home Education Association and HEN, which is in WA, and so they would be able to give you specific information about what you need in Western Australia.
Yeah, great. Okay, cool. So we will link out to them as well, and people can find the information that they need for those of you over in Western Australia.
Mm.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. That's a great little around the ground overview of sort of the differences between the states. Obviously, as we said, people need to do their own research about their own state, and in Western Australia, it sounds like even in your own region within your state, just to make sure that you've got the right requirements, make sure that you're well prepared. Great little tip to have a friend or an experienced home educator to also be there with you, just to help that process as you're kind of cycling through it, and yeah, just to be really well prepared in what is required. Just so that it seems a little less daunting. It seems less daunting for me, which is great. I'm not at that stage, as I said, just yet. But having this conversation has been really helpful to be able to break it down. So thank you.
You're welcome. I think it is helpful to ensure that whatever you do end up doing, you don't let yourself get overwhelmed, because really home education is about what you're doing for your own family and for your children. And if the paperwork is becoming overwhelming and daunting, that's really not okay, because it takes away from what you're doing with your children. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, then make sure you get in touch with HEA. We've got a helpline, or other people who are home educating in your local area, and just see how you can de-stress and do it in a way that works for you. Because if your state's paperwork requirements seem overwhelming for you, it's probably because the information they provide is not very helpful. And so I'm sure there's a way you can do it which is less daunting.
Fantastic. That's helpful. Thanks. That's good. Yeah, I know it can seem like a bit of a daunting process, so that sounds like some sound advice for sure.
I find, particularly in New South Wales, is that people who are potentially newer to home education and a little bit stressed and daunted about their paperwork, they produce something that is really quite a lot of work for them, but they produce something really, really big and
So they kind of go overkill.
yeah. And
Right.
what happens then is that then they might get their full registration or re-registration, and then they're quite pleased because it was so much work, and then the authorized person comes out and says, or the moderator or whatever comes out and says, oh, you've done a really amazing job. And then they feel really happy, which,
Right.
of course they feel happy because they put all this work in, and then they were commended for the work that they did. But the problem is that then sometimes they'll share that. They'll go, look, I managed to get 2 years or whatever, or a year or whatever it was. And then they'll share that with someone else. And then that other person goes, wow, I've got to produce something that looks like that. Okay. And
Right. Okay.
really big document. So what we really recommend is that people produce minimal documentation.
Right. Okay.
So
Which kind
rather,
of sits contrary to what you'd expect, that you need to provide everything up front.
yeah. Now, if
Okay.
you produce something that's quite minimal, for starters, it's not overwhelming. And secondly, it means that when the authorized person comes to the next person, they actually expect something that's not been overwhelming for that other person. And
Yeah,
so
because I suppose it sets a standard. If
yeah.
that's the
So
case, yeah.
otherwise, if people keep producing these onerous documents, then you're raising the bar for the next person. And really, what you're doing is about educating your own children. So if you produce this plan that includes daily lessons for the next year or 2 years or whatever, then you're producing something that probably you'll have to change as you go through.
Right.
So, because you actually want to meet the needs of your children, and you want to follow the rabbit trails, you want to go on those excursions that come up that you weren't expecting,
Mm.
and then they produce a whole lot of new questions. So, if you've produced this really detailed document, for starters, it's going to conflict with the day-to-day learning that your children are likely to do, and then it'll potentially you'll have to, set it aside or
Sure.
throw it out the window, and
Yeah.
then follow different. And that actually happens with a lot of home educators. They start off using one particular style or having one particular idea, or using a particular resource, and then they'll change because that didn't work for their children. They found something else that works better. Their children are really interested in a particular um, in reptiles or horses or something which hadn't been obvious earlier.
Yeah. Okay. And then it allows you to go down the rabbit hole
Yeah,
with them. By having a looser plan,
yeah,
you don't feel both conflicted by the fact that you're not following the plan anymore, but you're also able to just let learning be.
yeah.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
And children are hardwired to want to learn.
Yeah. Yeah. We see that every day. I mean, we've got a 2-year-old, but
Yeah,
he's always grabbing something more to learn and learning new words, reading new books, always wanting to learn new stuff.
and
So
what you want to do is tap into that, and children
yeah.
will learn. And all the stuff that's in the curriculum has actually come from outside the classroom. All the stuff that they've documented in such convoluted language in the syllabus documents is actually from outside of the classroom, and it's stuff that your child is going to learn because they're outside the classroom, because they're in the real world.
Yeah, yeah, that's cool. I remember once speaking with an unschooling family who said that they said, well, our kids learned time and numbers and those sorts of things because they had to read a bus timetable. Like if they
Yeah,
wanted to get the bus, they literally needed to learn it. so,
yeah,
so they spent the time learning how to read it all.
yeah.
So yeah,
And
so true that it just occurs every day in everyday life.
yeah. I read a stage 2 outcome from New South Wales, which was for stuff that my 10-year-old was supposed to have learned. And one of those science outcomes was about identifies that adding or removing heat causes something to change from a solid to a liquid. And I thought, wow, any preschooler who's licked an ice block or held an ice cube in their hand has already completed that outcome.
Oh, we learned that one yesterday then. Yes. Outcome complete.
Yeah.
Take that one off.
So people shouldn't be daunted by syllabus documents, and they shouldn't feel a need to ensure that these things which are in such convoluted educational jargon need to be replicated in their home, because really all that learning happens in the real world.
Yeah, that's great. And part of that was sort of the reason behind what we included in our planner, which was not to have such strict planning guidelines, but to have the record of learning sheets, just so people can, jot it down if they're thinking of it. And you've got kind of a weekly summary thing, and you might just add in some of these sorts of things, licked an ice cream. That's that
and really
KLA ticked off.
If you've got a pretty planner, it might make the recording more
motivating,
enjoyable. But you should make it happen in a way that is really not onerous for you as a parent, because really doing the day-to-day with your children is what's really important.
Absolutely. And practicality and progress over perfection is how I always put it. much better to have a process that works than a process that simply looks good. So, yeah, absolutely.
Because really, it's very important that people aren't raising the bar for the other people around them.
Yeah, I'd never sort of thought about that, but by setting a standard, you set a standard not only for yourself to have to do that again and again and again. And if you've got it at age 5 as some elaborate giant document, what's it going to look like by the time they're much older, and you feel that you still have to keep up that standard? But not only that, but what it does to your neighbour as well, that they then have to step up to the same overwhelming plate that's up there.
And I mean, home educators really are at a bit of a disadvantage, because they're often isolated by the recording process. Each person generally only experiences their own visit when, if they have a visit with an authorised person or a moderator. So
whereas school it's a given. This is the progress that happens.
So because you just see that one person, the moderator or the authorised person can actually say things which sound like they're a requirement, like keep a daily diary. It sounds like it's a requirement when that person says that to you.
So then they come back at the end of the year and I've done everything, and they go, wow, that's a bit much.
Well, they might say that to you, or they might say, oh, that's really
awesome.
amazing.
Keep that up. Yeah.
And then the next person says, oh, I've got my visit coming, and you go, oh, I made sure I kept a daily diary for the last 12 months. And that person says, oh, my goodness, I haven't done that. And they completely freak out. So,
of course.
So while, keeping a diary is worthwhile when it's for the parent and not onerous, but if it's because you think that's a requirement because that's what the moderator said, then that becomes a burden.
Sure. So just do your research in regards to that, just to make sure you know what the minimum requirement is, so you don't set a bar too high for yourself.
That's right.
Yeah, cool. Aim low, as we.
Well, I mean, it sounds bad, but it's because the actual recording and the paperwork is actually not adding to the education of your child.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, when I think about sort of mainstream schooling, what you end up with at the end of a year in terms of recorded work is often 5 workbooks. Kind of thing? Like one for maths, one for English, one for science, blah blah blah.
And sometimes
there's not really much more to it.
Completed.
Well,
sometimes. And the report that you get at the end of the year, because the teachers had to do, a lot of reports for all the children, then they only are very minimalistic. So why should we have to record more than a sentence per 6 months for each child, like the teacher does?
Yeah, that's it. And can we as home educating parents also just put, my child is a conscientious worker and has, those generic lines that teachers use, where 16 out of the 20 kids get the same statement on their little report at the end of the year. So you just copy and paste for all your kids. So we've mentioned the HEA a couple of times throughout, but where can people find you guys? Where do they need to go? We'll also link to this under the conversation we're having.
Yeah, so the HEA is www.hea.edu.au.
Fantastic. Cool. And we will, as I said, we will link to that and some of the other resources per state. We'll kind of give a per state breakdown. For those listening, you'll see it underneath. And I think that is a wrap. So thanks, Vivienne, for jumping on this call with me and sort of breaking it all down. It's been really, really helpful. And all the best for this year.
Thank you. And all the best for your year ahead too.
Thanks. So there you have it, guys. I hope you found this discussion helpful and got something out of it. Let us know in the comments below this discussion what you found helpful, or if you have any other comments or burning questions, throw them in there too. I'd love to do more of these kinds of interviews for you, but we won't know unless you tell us. So I'm happy to ask the basic questions and ask the people who know more about these things. We make a point of keeping an eye out and answering all the questions that come through on our site, so please don't be a stranger. And if you'd like a sample of our daily notes planner from the 2018 planner, you can get that too on our site. Just click on the freebies tab and it is all there ready for you. Also, if you're on Instagram or Facebook, come and join us there too. And it sounds like my son is ready to jump in the pool, so I'm going to go and do that. Thanks for joining me today and catch you next time. Bye-bye.